is Nikki Haley, presidential candidate and former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. So this news breaking late overnight. I think some people might be surprised that Americans are still in Syria. You can address that, but first, could you talk about the Biden administration response? Do you think that is what you would expect, or would you like to see something more aggressive before something like this happens?
Good morning, Dana. I think that, this is a reminder of two things. One, we live in a very dangerous world, and you have a partnership with China, Russia, and Iran that is determined to continue to do more threats around the world. Secondly, it shows what happens when there's American weakness. I mean, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether you see it in Ukraine, whether you see it on the southern border, you're going to continue to see more of these things happen. I'm glad to see that Biden did strike back, but think about what happened last week. Here you had the Russians, they shot down a U.S. drone. What did Biden do? Nothing. When you do nothing, when you show weakness in any area, they're going to continue to do more. What we should have done with the drone last week is put 2 drones back up there, put a fighter jet up there to let them know we're not playing, put our naval fleet back in the Black Sea, because we never should have pulled it out. We have to start showing American strength. And I'm glad to see that they did strikes back to show that at least we were awake. But now we've got to make sure that we're standing strong. And that is why it's so important to have the back of Ukraine, because a win for Russia is a win for China, and they're very much having a plan to change the world order, to eliminate the West, and to take over. And that's something we can never have happen.
Can you talk a little bit about the tensions that are increasing between Iran and Israel, our ally, and the fact that what the administration reported this week out of the Pentagon is that Iran could be within 2 weeks of having a nuclear weapon?
Well, and, they're getting assistance from China. They're getting, they're helping Russia and Ukraine. Iran can do this. But the thing that stops Iran is deterrence. And there is no deterrence. There hasn't been any deterrence for a long time. There should have been deterrence, and it's not that we got out of Afghanistan. It's how we got out of Afghanistan. When you look at Ukraine, look at how long it took Biden to do something. And then when he finally did, he's been weak and slow to the take. We need to show strength, and we need to get with our allies to show strength. It was really an unbelievable thing to see that China brokered that deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. We really need to stay close to the Iranian partners, with the Arab partners, so that we can keep Iran from getting a bomb. And I think Israel is in jeopardy now, and I think they're more concerned than ever seeing that deal with Iran and Saudi Arabia and wondering what's the U.S. going to do to help us. And I think if Israel makes a move, you can't blame them.
You wrote on Monday in the Wall Street Journal, call for number 2, that China wins if Russia conquers Ukraine. And then another possible presidential candidate, Ron DeSantis, clarified some comments that he'd made about Ukraine with Piers Morgan. Listen here.
What's your view of Putin?
Look, I think he's got grand ambitions. I think he's hostile to the United States. But I think the thing that we've seen is he doesn't have the conventional capability to realize his ambitions.
There is a move now to hold him accountable for war crimes. Would you support that?
I mean, I think he is a war criminal, but I do think that he should be held accountable.
What do you believe in terms of Putin and the war criminal designation?
That weaken the knees mentality is exactly what got us in the situation we're in with China. Is with people saying, oh, they're fine. They can't do anything. We need to leave them alone. We need to stay out of it. Well, now look at what China's doing to us. They're buying up our farmland. We're looking at the sky and we're seeing a Chinese spy balloon. They're sending fentanyl across the border. We're seeing they gave us COVID. We're continuing to see one threat after the other. You can't have that kind of weaken the knees mentality when it comes to Russia. Russia is doing the dirty work for China. That's why they shot our U.S. drone down last week. Russia continues. If you saw that picture this week, that was very telling. After naming themselves unlimited partners, that is exactly the picture they wanted the world to see, is that the new axis of evil is China and Russia. Their junior partner is Iran, and they're going to continue going forward. You can't say we're not going to be strong for Ukraine. If Ukraine wins, it sends a message to China, Russia, and Iran. If Ukraine loses, you can bet Poland and the Baltics are next, and we're looking at a world war. This is about preventing war. That doesn't mean we put money in Ukraine's pocket. It doesn't mean we put troops on the ground, but we work with our allies to get them the ammunition they need to defeat Russia.
One last quick question, though, because that might be one characterization of what was said, or that approach, but the American people in these polls that we're seeing are kind of in that category. That's where they're landing. How would you propose to try to persuade them otherwise as you continue on with your candidacy?
I think you remind them exactly what the threats are that we're dealing with, and understand that when China and Russia stood next to each other and said what great friends they were, when you caught President Xi on a hot mic saying we're changing the world for the first time in 100 years and we're doing it together, that means if you help Putin or you back away from Putin, you're backing away from China. We have to wake up. I don't care what the polls say. The polls said the same thing about China, and look at where we're dealing with what we're dealing with now. We need to be smart. We need to be strategic. We need to prevent further wars coming forward.
Nikki Haley, thank you for joining us this morning.
Okay, thank you.
John?